Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us in today's talk. My name is Polina. I am the co-host of the Leader in You podcast, brought to you by EmC Leaders. And I co-host the podcast with Dr. Lola Gershfeld, who also happens to be my mother. Can you see the resemblance? No, I don't know. So Dr. Lola is an organizational psychologist. She's also the founder of EmC Leaders, and she also created the emotional connection process, otherwise known as EmC. So we're going to go over today is the EmC process. So we also have here Niamh Hannan, who is here joining us from Ireland. She's the EmC Certified Training Center in Europe. So she has a center in Ireland, and she does all the training for internal trainers and companies that are located in Europe. We're going to get started.
Thank you again for being here. I'm so excited. So one of the things why I created the emotional connection process is because I was very, very exhausted from all the conflicts that were happening in our companies, whether I was at a board level, at the middle level, at the leadership level, at the lower level, doesn't matter. The conflicts would come up again and again. And in fact, looking at the study by Global Human Capital Report put by the Myers-Briggs company showed that in 2008, 3 hours per week was wasted on workplace conflict per person. 3 hours per week. And this could be calling in sick. This could be, I don't want to deal with this person. This could be disengagement. This could be withdrawing, avoiding, or attacking and trying to get into this conflict. The same company put out this report in 2022 and said that this number went to 4.3 hours per week. So as you can think about it, like I've been always wondering, what is this? Why people keep stuck in conflicts? And why are we giving all this training and the number is still going up? With all the hours of training, like I used to be L&D professional, and you teach people communication skills or negotiation skills. You teach people how to resolve conflict, but still it only works like for 1 or 2 weeks, and then the same pattern comes back. So meetings become useless. People get exhausted. They stop talking to each other or they avoid each other. So I went back to school. I learned all this. And it was actually going through the personal workshop, a couples workshop, that I recognize the pattern that happens in the personal relationships happen at work, the same patterns. So I started to bring this emotionally focused approach to dealing with conflicts to workplace. And things started to change like immediately. And well, what was it? What was that changed the whole thing? Skills do not resolve conflicts, and they will not eliminate conflicts, because skills are contained in the prefrontal cortex. It's a logical part of the brain. That's where the skills are. When people feel disconnected and get hurt, like rejected, feel not valued, feel not heard, that is emotional part. That is responsible. And what happens, the emotional part blocks and hijacks the prefrontal cortex. So now that all the skills that you taught your people go out the window, they're not accessible. They all have skills. They will do it in your training sessions, but they cannot use it when people get disconnected. So what happens is we really need to teach people how to deal with emotions, because the emotions is what drive the interactions. So the emotional connection process, what it helps you, it understands how to be accessible, responsive, and engaged. It helps you to understand how to work through emotions. And so this is what we're going to teach you today. This is not the whole EmC process, but this is one of the tools that we use, is the EmC Reconnection Form. Niamh is going to tell a little bit about attachment, why the connection is so important.
Sure. When we feel connected and safe, well, first of all, we know there's huge research behind psychological safety. And so the highest performing teams, it's the number one factor that they all have in common is psychological safety. So when a team feels safe and connected, then they can do their best work. Because we work together in a team, or you have a manager and a direct report, there's a dependency there. We depend on our team and our manager to be able to do our best work. We need to collaborate. I need you to finish this part, so then I can do that part, so then together, we're performing. So because of that dependency, tendency, there's an attachment need. So we need to be able to securely attach with our team members and with our manager, or if you're a manager, with your team, and they need to feel safe and secure. And that is what allows for high performance then in turn.
Yes, thank you very much. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you, you all have a copy of the Reconnection Form. I'm going to go through it right now, just the structure. And those people who have got the EmC journal, it's like full of reconnection forms, empty forms. But I'm going to go through the structure, and then Niamh and Polina are going to role play, like demonstrate to you, and we'll go box by box, stage by stage, so you can understand. The biggest thing we are doing in this process is we're slowing down the emotion. That's number one. Emotions are very fast, and they are supposed to be fast because they save our lives. But emotions also get us stuck in conflicts and get us stuck being disconnected. So the first thing is, let's look at the structure of the form. You have two sides. You have on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side, you have like person A for the left-hand side and person B for the right-hand side.
So if you have the form, you're looking at the top part on the left side and the right side. So remember, we're using this form to work through a conflict that you have with a coworker, a team member, or a manager that you don't know how to resolve. Okay, so we want to work through it in a way that makes it easy for us and effective. The effectiveness of communication is what brings us closer together in a relationship and not further away.
Okay, so then the form is separated by 4 parts. The top one is called initial reaction. The middle part is internal experience. Then we have negative cycle, which keeps it going. And then we have positive cycle, which is on the next page. So each side has a box. So there are 8 boxes. The very top is the triggers. That's box 1. Number 2, box 2 is the raw spots, that's called. It's the sensitivities that people have when the disconnection happens. Box 3 is the emotions, what's happening with the internal experience. Box 4 is automatic thoughts. Box 5 is the automatic behaviors that we do, which is protection. We protect ourselves in the moment. And then box 6 is the attachment needs that get lost when we get disconnected. And box 7 is the positive emotions when we get repaired, when we reconnect. And box 8 is what behaviors do we do once we feel safe and connected. And Polina, did you want to add anything?
Well, I love this form because you can use it inside work and outside work. So I have 5 kids and I use this form with my kids. So if you also have a relationship, you can use it. It's multi-purpose for every single conflict in your life.
You can facilitate a conversation between 2 coworkers, or you can do it with yourself, with somebody who feel disconnected. Obviously, it takes training, right? It takes practice to do this conversation. Another part that is very important is, how do we respond to emotions when people share with us? And this form is designed to share vulnerability in a professional and safe way. Because when we are hurt and we respond by blaming or judging or criticizing other people, that is going to trigger them to defend, attack, or withdraw. So what we want to do is we want to share it in a vulnerable way, and they have to be open to accept, validate, and reassure. And this form helps us to do that. If you notice that under every box, there's a response. So for example, that makes sense. Thank you for sharing. All of these, it gives the space. It allows the other person to share their experience without defensiveness, without shutting down, or without attacking. But again, it takes practice to do that, because again, emotions are fast and they're also contagious. So if I'm feeling stressed, you're going to feel stress automatically.
That's why we're going to practice now. Okay.
So I'm going to tell you a little story, a case study, if you will. So you have Linda and Mike. So Linda is the vice president of a company and Mike reports to her. are. And in a team meeting one day, one of the team was saying about, another colleague who was difficult and giving out about them. And Mike said, yeah, they can be difficult to manage. And Linda felt triggered by that, but she didn't say anything in the moment. And the next day she rings Mike and she goes, you shouldn't have said that. Well, Mike is totally taken aback and he doesn't even know what to say. So he just goes silent. So Linda then feels like she hasn't had a satisfactory response. So a week later at the next team meeting, she brings it up again, this time indirectly, and says, we shouldn't talk about others badly in the workplace. And she finishes it with a Greek quote about how great minds, focus on ideas and not on people, or talk about ideas rather than people. So Mike felt totally exposed and again, just shut down. And from then on, there was a distance between them. They're each frustrated with each other and kind of avoiding each other as well. As you can see, in this case, typical, easy to happen kind of case, both people now are ending up triggered and not really speaking to each other. So we want to go through the reconnection for Mike and Linda to give you an example.
The form that you have is already filled in. And what we're going to do is we're going to do box by box to practice. How is it for you to even experience this type of conversation? So the first thing is the trigger. And this is very important for people to understand what they get triggered in. That's why this process helps to slow it down. And we have it by words, action, facial. Imagine facial expression really triggers people. And also body language is, for example, I was at a meeting a couple of days ago and this person was talking and the other person was not looking at them. And that was very difficult for the other person that they were not looked at. So all of these are triggers and we have to understand our triggers. So the first thing is the trigger. We're going to just do box one. Okay, so that's how the conversation goes. Polina is going to play the role of Mike. First of all, you decide who's going to be the role of Mike or the role of Linda. So go ahead and make that decision first. Okay, everybody got their roles. Okay, now, so I want you to watch how that sounds and then you're going to practice, okay?
Just a reminder that this conflict occurred in a team that we worked with. And then we used this process to reconnect them after they were kind of going back and forth and became very distant and had a lot of issues because of it. Well, Linda, I got triggered when you said you shouldn't have said that. And that in the meeting, you brought it up, that the quote, and indirectly, I got really triggered by what you said in the meeting.
I can imagine that was difficult. Thank you for sharing. Mike, I got triggered when you first said this person could be difficult to manage. And then when you were unresponsive to me, that further triggered me when I called you.
Thank you for sharing. That must have been very difficult for you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'd like to go ahead and for you to practice just that, sharing your triggers.
Okay, remember, we're only saying like 1.5 sentences to each other. Yeah? Okay, so take a deep breath, smile, look over here. Hello, hello. Okay, so yeah, how was it for you? Maybe it was weird, maybe it was like reading a script, or you felt comfortable? Yes.
Question. So, like the expectations set beforehand. So, like in a perfect world, Mike would share his triggers, Linda would share hers. But like Mike, in the real world application, Mike is, hey, this situation triggered me, and like Linda made up, and we just go.
Yeah. No, this is okay. So great question. So every part of the form is set up to organize what happened with us in the situation so we can effectively communicate it. So as we go down through the blocks to the different sections, we actually go through and are able to help express exactly. So there doesn't have to add anything else than I got triggered when this and this happened. Does that make sense?
I think what you're saying is, yes, they need training. It doesn't happen just, sometimes I do a session where people are really being disconnected and I lead them. Like I say, what triggered you? And so they tell me, and then I organize it. So what I'm hearing
That's what the form is doing.
Right, that's what I'm saying is that you got triggered when Mike made this response. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. Can you turn to him and say that? Okay.
Yes. So if you're in a conflict, sometimes when you're you're off balance, right? Ideally, remember the form is to get us back to balance so that we can reconnect and communicate with each other. Because when we get upset or frustrated or we're conflicted, disconnected, we're off balance. So we cannot respond to someone else's needs. So that's why we're just following like a script, specifically because we cannot organize our feelings when we're disconnected ourselves. So you can always have, like, let's say your manager is not involved in the disconnection between you and your coworker. They can help facilitate the conversation as well. But the point of the form is to use the form to facilitate the conversation that's difficult.
The process is designed to de-escalate the emotions. So it goes in a certain way because that helps the amygdala to calm down. And by having a facilitator who is calm and going slow with the emotions, that helps us to process the emotions. And the fact we know, for example, that when we can name the emotions more specifically, that actually helps to reduce the intensity of those emotions. So this process is designed intentionally to de-escalate and to help the person to feel seen and feel heard in their emotional experience. So we focus on the emotions rather than the content, because a lot of approaches focus on the content, and then, you sort out the content of this today and reach an agreement, and tomorrow they're arguing about something else because the repair didn't happen. So does that make sense?
Okay, you had another question.
Do you give them the form? Okay, so two questions, I guess a two-part question. So at the time of the conflict, is that when you, as the facilitator, is stepping in and then you hand in the form, let them fill it out, and then bring them back?
Sure, you can do that. Yes, you can do it. It just depends. You can ask them to fill it out, or you fill it out for them, and then you give them the copies. Or you want to teach people how to do it themselves so they can repair the conflict and feel comfortable with that. Yes.
But it does take longer than an hour to teach people. So we're just giving you a taster of it today, but like normally this would be a 3-day training.
I just want to add something really quick. When there's a conflict, I have a team of 5 people. My family, my 5 kids. And so when a conflict occurs, I say, okay, it's time to do a session. Just like that. And then we have the forms and we all sit down and each person gets a turn. Now they are so familiar with the language, right? Same with my team at work. They get to just pull it out and they know, like, okay, let me clearly identify what triggered me. In the first part, I noticed some people were like adding extra words, or maybe it was difficult to say, thank you for sharing. That makes sense. And they were saying like, okay, it's really important we just follow the script. It's very clear, right? I got triggered when da 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 da. Thank you for sharing. That makes sense, because we want to keep it safe for both people. Okay. So we're not actually expressing the feelings and until a little later.
Okay, we're going to go to the next part, but we will try to answer some questions, okay? Next part is raw spots. Raw spots are sensitivities that we all have, no matter who you are. CEOs, it's not CEO, manager, you all have raw spots. And raw spots are trauma, injuries, or hurt feelings that were not resolved and are there. And then something happens and boom, they are activated in that moment. For Linda and Mike, they had raw spots. Go ahead.
My raw spot was number 1, being excluded. Number 8, showing of disapproval of me. And number 11, being judged as not good enough.
That makes sense. Thank you, Linda. Mike. So my raw spots then were number 3, having an ambition that I felt wasn't being heard, a sense of being criticized, and demeaning comments.
Thank you for sharing. That makes sense.
Okay. Go ahead and practice with your partner. Just that. My raw spots, I know the numbers are really difficult to see, but for Mike, it was number 1, 8, and 11. And for Linda, it was number 3, 6, and 14.
So you're just repeating that same phrase. Okay, my raw spots were. Okay, wonderful. So remember, simple. Yeah, how was it for you? A lot of these things we say in our head in different ways. They come out in complaining, judging, criticizing, shaming, and blaming other people, right? We want to point fingers so that we're not the bad guy. So in this entire process, we are removing fault, not accountability or responsibility, just fault. So no one feels like it's their fault, because as soon as someone feels blamed or shamed, then it shuts them down and it's very difficult for them to feel safe. So that's why we talk about the raw spots in this way. Hey, these were my sensitivities. And then the other person, actually, you get to know that person on a deeper level. And then it becomes more aware for you and for them.
And we have a list of raw spots I'm including in the resources. So I will show you the QR code for the full list of raw spots. This is abbreviated way, but you will have a list. Another thing I want to say is this: one of the biggest problems we have in the companies is that we don't share the sensitivities, and then we get triggered over and over and over again. This actually helps other people and yourself to learn about your sensitivities. And when you get reconnected and repaired, your sensitivities become not sensitive anymore because you are less triggered when you feel safe and connected with your team. Okay, the next thing we're going to do emotions.
Yes. So we have 3. Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
I like the idea of sharing the sensitivities, but what happens when one individual doesn't want to say?
They're sensitive. Oh, that makes sense. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we understand that it's hard. So the facilitator can be saying, like, I know it's hard for you to say that makes sense. And that's okay because they feel different, or they feel it's hard for them to accept. So that's okay.
So the part of this process too is that we're meeting people where they're at. So not everyone can tend to someone else's needs when they're triggered, right? So when someone can't say that makes sense, and we just have to keep going through the process until they feel safe, right?
Well, what triggers you doesn't trigger me.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
But that's okay. We
And that's
validate.
why, yeah. And that's why it's, even if you don't have a facilitator to help with this form, it's important to understand. Sometimes I have to say, like, could you say that makes sense, or, and it could be no. And sometimes we ask, like, oh, did you believe what that other person said? And sometimes it's no. And when it's no, at least they feel safe saying no. If they're not responding, we usually say, like, it's okay to say no, right? We're just accepting people where they're at in any level of this. And that will create more safety every single time you say that.
It's the validation that's really important. You're validating them. That's why we have these phrases written, so that there's constant validation for a person. You're emotionally validating their emotional experience so that their nervous system can begin to calm down. So at the beginning of the process, they're not there yet. And the other thing I think that it can be important to know is that, if you've got like very escalated conflict, or it's very deep, or it's been ongoing for a long time, it may not be safe to bring the two people straight away together. We may work with each person separately first, so they feel heard and their emotions are de-escalated and they're a little calmer before it's safe to bring them together, so they don't end up screaming at each other.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
So is it okay? Let's say that I expressed to Mike how I felt, and Mike didn't think that made sense. Would it be okay for Mike to say, hey, that doesn't make sense to me yet, but I want to understand. Can I ask you some more questions, or do we want to not?
No questions. Yeah.
No.
We are allowing each person's experience to share. That's what we're doing. Okay.
So
we don't have to agree.
Yeah, this is very important. Thank you for bringing this up. In every conflict, we have 2 truths. Each person has their own truth. And I see this so often because sometimes it could be difficult to hear what you did to trigger the other person, right? So at the very first box, people cannot be triggered again because they're like, I didn't do that. That wasn't my, and the point is we just keep them quiet, and either one, you just have that one sentence to share and to follow the script so that each person's still valid. You don't have to agree, right? So no one, just because I'm attending to your needs doesn't mean I agree with your perspective, right? And you also get clarity once people are connected. So let's say you go through the process and at the end, what you'll see is we'll respond to each other emotionally. Then you can have a clarifying conversation, right? Then it's like, oh, that's not what you meant. Oh, I didn't know. Oh, okay. Now we feel good. Okay.
All right. So now we're going to do the emotions. And emotions are very big and sometimes can come a lot of emotions at the same time. We want to articulate 3 levels of emotions: surface emotions, softer emotions, and then primary emotions. And this is a lot of work. I don't want to bore you with the theories, but basically we are tending to the amygdala in that moment when we're organizing, clarifying, and expressing emotions.
I just want to add to that, just like Niamh said earlier, emotions are like bricks, like the difficult emotions. If we hold on to them, then we are adding bricks to the bag that we are carrying. Sometimes you heard people say like, oh, they have a lot of emotional baggage. It's not baggage. It's just that they don't have the tools to express those difficult emotions, right? So a few people walked out at the beginning of this session when we said, oh, we're going to practice. We're going to role play. Emotions are very scary. So you guys should just be very proud of yourselves for saying
You're the courageous ones.
Yeah, to be able to share your feelings, but you're actually freeing yourself from jail. This is a very important part. A lot of times we have team members that go up to like just the third part, express their emotions, and they already feel significantly better. And sometimes conflicts are resolved very quickly in that way as well. Okay.
I wanted to say one thing about this as well, because I love this part, the 3 different levels of emotion. Like I worked as a psychologist for 20 years before I discovered this with Dr. Lola. And I think it's so helpful, and you can use it with your kids, even just this much, because most of the time we're only aware at the surface level. They're the emotions that we can see in other people and recognize in ourselves. So we know when we're irritated and annoyed and frustrated, and we tend to express from our surface emotions. And when we express those kind of emotions, we tend to push people away. So we also now help people to identify what's going on under the surface, the softer, more vulnerable emotions. They can be more difficult because we don't like to feel those icky, uncomfortable, vulnerable emotions. So they're harder for us to identify. So again, having the checklist makes it a lot easier. And when we can express from our softer emotions, that actually pulls people towards us. We know, again, Brené Brown has done lots of research on vulnerability, in the workplace. So this gives the tools for that.
Okay, Mike and Linda.
Okay. So Linda, my surface emotions were irritated, frozen, and angry. And my softer emotions were hurt, rejected, and embarrassed. And I also felt my primary emotions were fear, sad, and surprised.
That must have been very difficult. Thank you for sharing. In that moment, I felt on the surface irritated, disturbed, and exhausted. And then my softer emotions were helpless and panicked. And also I felt like I was failing. And then primary emotions, I felt a mixture of fear and sadness.
Thank you for sharing. You're so
Okay, go
courageous.
ahead and practice with your partner. Yeah, any quick comment or thought how it was for you to share that? Okay, we'll go to the next part. One of the ways for us to slow down emotions is to understand what's happening with our body. And this is Magna Arnold work, is the image, what's happening. How do we describe those emotions in that moment? Because that gives the other person a sense of the depth of that trigger and or the disconnection. Then we talk about the body, like where do you feel it? Because the body tells us, for example, if you feel it in your stomach, that's shame. If you feel it in your chest, that's fear. If you feel it in your head or shoulders, that's sadness. And that's not my interpretation. This is like research done. And then the worst fears. And then we have 3 different fears. Fear about myself in that moment, fear about you as pertains to me, and then fear about the relationship. Okay, so Linda and Mike are going to demonstrate how it works.
Okay, Linda. So my image was being shot, sitting in a meeting with knives and rocks flying at me. And I felt it in my stomach and my chest. My worst fear about myself was I'm alone. My worst fear about you as it pertains to our relationship was that you don't care about me. And the worst fear about our relationship is that we can't work as a team.
You're so courageous and strong. Thank you.
Thank you.
My image was I'm in a coliseum, and that comment was like death to me. It has so much power. I felt it in my chest. I felt panic. My worst fear about myself is that I'm failing. My worst fear about you is that you don't value me. And my worst fear about our relationship was that we'd be stuck in this negative cycle.
You're so courageous. Thank you for sharing.
Actually, this is very common. I've done like over close to 2,000 conflicts resolution sessions, and a lot of people say it's like death to me. When we are disconnected, I'm death. Like I died in that moment. So it's actually very clear for us, and there's lots of existential fear that comes up for us when we are disconnected. Okay, so go ahead and share that with your partner. Okay, great. How was it for you? Any comments? Yes, questions?
I feel like this is very tense. Like I personally don't allow people at work to have that much power over me, right? Like, I don't think anyone will make me feel these ways. Like, if it was like my husband or something, that's different. But I guess like this is just really intense. Like, is this a common feeling? You said
Yes, it's common. It's unfortunately common, and maybe you have not had that type of experience because you.
I just don't.
Oh, you have, but you don't imagine. You can't imagine sharing that.
Like, yes, and also like, I don't know. I mean, I don't feel like if I have this experience, I wouldn't feel like people are safe to share this way.
I hear
Yeah.
you. Yeah, that
Yeah.
totally fits. Totally fits. Yes. And it's interesting. People will share because they will risk. It's a risk. People will risk because they need connection. They yearn for connection. It is part of our survival code. And they will risk when you make safety for them, right? If they know you are there to help them to create a safe environment where they can share this, they will be, yes, of course, it's open, it's vulnerable, it's a risk. And it has helped a lot of teams, a lot.
I think also I just want to add that because I had a lot of skepticism and fear learning this because this is very recent for me, like just the last 6 years. And I felt the same exact way. But the control is a protective behavior. Like when we feel, well, we don't allow anyone to control us that way or to be in that view of us so deep and are vulnerable in that way. It's because I was hurt so many times. That was my protective behavior. It was automatic for me. I'm like, oh, I'm just not even gonna go there. I just don't do that at work. So the reason why we do that is to protect ourselves from getting hurt again. But actually, when we learn this process, we become so much stronger that when we do have a situation like that, we're no longer sensitive, just like Dr. Lola said. So the ability for me to deal with conflicts and escalated people has like gone from 0 to 100. I can deal with people in a very calm way if they're escalated themselves. And I can share in a vulnerable way and that impacts them differently. And the last thing I want to say before I answer your question, maybe not the last because I love talking. So oftentimes we ask people to change behavior, right? Well, oh, you're going to have to change in order for me to see that I'm not going to write you up or I'm not going to fire you. The problem is that our behaviors are only changed based on our intrinsic emotions, right? If we are feeling it intrinsically, that's what drives us to change behavior. That's why there's that quote, people never change. Well, if you tell someone to change their behavior, they will not change. But if you share how it impacted you emotionally, they care about the relationship, they will make that change without you having to say it. So, and I had an amazing situation with a team member who I said that came into the meeting and he came in always like looking very unhappy. And I was running the meeting and I'm like, every time you come, you look very unhappy. This was a session we had. And so instead of saying that, I said, I followed this form and I said, when you come, it makes me feel like I'm not valued, right? That you don't want to be part of my meeting. And the next day he came to the meeting like smiling and he said, is that better? Like, I want to make sure that you feel valued, right? Because that's the driving force to our behaviors is our emotions. Yes.
From psychologist to psychologist, is this like the control mechanism then?
We don't want to control anyone.
It's a guide. It's a guide. Yeah. Safe
It's
haven
an
and secure
organizational
base.
way. Yeah. So we,
To do this
yes.
because I think it gives control to a person that otherwise, because when I was doing this like a role play, I wanted to run away.
Yes. Yeah. It's very normal.
Because that's
Those are the,
the worst.
yeah.
That's not to be vulnerable.
Yes, it doesn't want to be vulnerable. Yes.
Be vulnerable. It's called to default. It's one, so it's our flight mechanism.
Yes. It's a flight mechanism. If you suppress emotions, you cannot suppress just negative emotions. You will suppress positive emotions as well. So you won't be able to recognize people. You won't be able to pay attention to the little things they do. You won't be able to be yourself if you shut down the emotions that you have, negative emotions.
And ultimately, we want you to be yourself. This is the whole point of doing a form, right? Because when we're disconnected and off balance, we move further away from our true self, following with what's going on in our heart, as opposed to using our protected behaviors, which is I want to get out of here because I'm scared to get hurt again.
The, the other one thing that I wanted to mention was that we don't recognize how much of an impact we have on other people, and we don't consciously recognize the impact that other people have on us. So very often people will say, they'll come to me to do this process, maybe with a disconnect, say with their manager, and their conscious mind is telling me, yeah, no, they're not important to me. This relationship is not really important to me. I don't really care. They're just my manager. I just have to work with them 40 hours a week. And I'm like, I hear you. I hear that. That's what your conscious mind is telling me. And yet you're also telling me that you're losing sleep, that you're stressed, that you're distressed, that you're upset, that you're all these vulnerable emotions. So very often half of our brain is not copping on to the fact that the rest of us is really in distress. And that's the difference between the emotional brain, which we are processing. So there is the conscious part that kind of goes, I don't like this, I'm staying away from this. I don't even feel that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Rationalize it. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Okay, we're going to go to the next part, and you're going to do these 2 parts, box 4 and 5. Okay, so our automatic thoughts happen automatically, like we say, to protect ourselves. But that protection keeps you in prison and keeps the negative cycle going. Whenever we use complain, criticize, blame, lecture, demand, that is our protection to push for connection. When we use withdraw, avoid, get busy, shut down, that is protection to also keep the connection. But both of these strategies keep the negative cycle going. Go ahead.
Okay. So, Linda, my automatic thoughts were, I have to get away. And the way that I protected myself was I withdrew and I avoided you.
Thank you for sharing. That makes sense. So, Mike, my automatic thoughts were that I have to stop you. And the way I protected myself was demand and lecture.
Thank you for sharing. That makes sense.
When people actually express what they do, they start to recognize how they contribute to the negative cycle, how they contribute to the conflict that is coming up over and over again. Go ahead and practice. I just want to say one question I had is, does this work for passive-aggressive behavior people? Passive-aggressive behavior is the protection people use because of the disconnection that they have. They become passive-aggressive because they don't know how to understand what's happening for them, and they don't know how to respond. Any questions, any comments about this part? Okay, yes.
I have a general question. Does it ever backfire? And when I say backfire is if I'm Linda and Mike is talking and it triggered me, but it triggered me more on my ex-husband who was I was in a violent relationship. Does it ever backfire for some of those emotions that I haven't settled, like grow up and just kind of like regurgitate on poor Linda or poor Mike? Has that ever happened? And if it does, what are the safeguards on it? Because that's a lot of emotion, and we all have a lot of people just have PTSD. People have total pain. But when you start tackling into emotions, sometimes you open things up that probably wouldn't have been opened up. So
You're absolutely right. Actually, when we create safe environment for people to have conversations, sometimes people start to talk about all the injuries they've occurred in the relationship at work. For example, let's say I'm having a conversation and then I'm like, oh, I feel safe. All of a sudden I can talk about all the problems I've had with them. That does occur. And we typically try to redirect like, okay, we'll come back to another forum if we need to do that. But we're healing on a very deep level, which oftentimes the pattern is very similar from our childhood. Right? So of course you're going to have experiences that you've already experienced with your ex-husband or like your past with your relationships in your personal life, because those patterns are the same. They show up in every relationship, not just work, not just home. Sometimes that happens and we just continue to say the same phrases, which is that makes sense. Like, thank you for sharing. I get it. It's very difficult for you. And so you can heal that pattern with the person that you work with, but they may still have those same patterns with other people in the relationship. Although this part, the automatic protective behaviors and thoughts brings their awareness to what they do when they get triggered, right? So all of a sudden, when you have awareness, you're shining a light to a dark place. When you have awareness of that, the next time it happens, they can notice what they're doing. Oh, I'm withdrawing. Oh, my automatic protective behaviors is to shut down, to not talk to them, to just not, and that is when the change occurs, right? Because we can only have change when we have awareness of what we're experiencing emotionally. So that's what we do. And then, sometimes we have people that cry, right? Because that could be very hurtful to them. And that is just more awareness for us to hold space. That's why we take the blame out, because it's nobody's fault. Each person plays a role. And when we show this part, the protective behaviors and thoughts, what did you do to contribute to the cycle? What did you do to, neither person is bad, but you both took part in the cycle. Yeah.
And sometimes people will not admit, like, I didn't do anything, which means they're still protecting. That means that they don't still feel heard and validated on their experience. We say it makes sense. Yeah, I know it's hard. And we're going to go back to the place and maybe let's see like what was happening for you. Maybe they didn't express. Maybe that was not the trigger. So we go back and recognize what was the trigger.
Likewise, if they get triggered in the moment. So I'm listening to you're Linda. No, you're Mike. Okay,
I'm Mike.
I'm confusion. If I'm listening to Mike and I get triggered in the moment by something that Mike's saying, I'm like, I didn't. Yeah. Then the facilitator is like observing that as well. It's going, what's happening for you now? I notice that you got triggered, and you're using the same process. You're going back up. What was it that just triggered you there? That's the beauty of the process. You don't have to invent oh God, we got derailed. Where are we going to go? It's like, no, we just slow down and go back up and use the process and use the same skills.
Eventually, the conflicts become so small that you could repair them in like 10 to 15 minutes. That's what I see with my team now. It's okay. At the beginning, it was maybe an hour, 2 hours, and then they did all the training to understand how to communicate in this way. But now it's, let's get the form and let's have a corresponding conversation.
You had a question, but
I did. I can ask it then too. I already asked a question.
Oh, no problem.
Okay. I just want you to look at the negative cycle. It's not on my slide, but the negative cycle that you have on the form, I just want to give you a sense. The step starts at the way it says, I got triggered. So it's basically, I just want to review the steps. The negative cycle keeps going on when I get triggered, it hits my raw spot, I feel emotion, but I don't tell you. So I have automatic thought and protective behavior. This protective behavior triggers you and it hits your raw spot. You feel some emotion, you don't know what it is, and you go automatic thoughts, and then you protect yourself, and your protection triggers me again. So for Mike and Linda, if you remember the story, Linda got triggered first time when Mike said, this employee is difficult to manage. That triggered Linda. Because she didn't say anything, the next day, what does she do? She calls him and she criticizes him. She said, you shouldn't have said that, which triggered Mike. So her protection, instead of saying, Mike, that was embarrassing for me, I get scared when I hear this comment that I'm failing as a manager. That is not criticism. That is sharing your vulnerability, your fear, what is happening for you in that moment. And now Mike says, wow, thank you for sharing, Linda. I had no idea that it was so difficult. He actually made that comment to support the production manager who said, I have a difficult employee on my team. Indirectly, look what happens. This conversation happened over and over every single day in all of your teams, and people don't know how to talk about it. And that's why the disengagement goes again higher, and the managers and the turnover, all of these things happen because people don't know how to repair their connection and disconnections that happen in the team. So the negative cycle steps go very, very fast. And when people get into that automatic protection, they continue to trigger each other over and over again. All right, so what we do in step 6 is that we address attachment needs. These are attachment needs. This is like core human needs. Doesn't matter what culture you come from, doesn't matter what language you speak, these are core attachment needs. Doesn't matter what gender you are, we all have attachment needs. And these attachment needs get violated in the moment when we get triggered. So after you do box 1 through 5, you come back to what is it that you needed? Instead of protection, instead of me blaming, judging, what did I need? Okay.
This is also closing the loop. Okay, so we are closing and creating a positive cycle. Okay, Linda, so what I need is for you to tell me that you care about me, my feelings are valid, to reassure me that I'm not alone, and to acknowledge that it was very difficult for me in that experience when you said that you shouldn't have said that and that you brought it up again in the meeting.
Thank you for sharing. I want to reassure you that I do care. Your feelings are valid. You're not alone. I care about you, and I can really see and acknowledge how difficult this was for you.
Thank you.
So what I need is I need to know that you care and that my feelings are valid. I also need reassurance that I'm not alone, and I also need it to be acknowledged how difficult this was for me.
Okay, yeah, so thank you for sharing. I want to tell you that I care about you. Your feelings are valid. I reassure you that you're not alone and that I acknowledge how difficult it was for you as well.
Thank you.
Aww.
Okay. I know it's hard even to imagine, right? To say that. I can tell you, I have done over with many different board members, CEOs, middle managers, lower man. It doesn't matter. From manager to the CEO, doesn't matter. People need this because they get hurt, disconnected, and they will take the risk. They will take the risk because they yearn for connection. Okay, go ahead and practice. Okay. We do this. All right. How was it for you? Not bad. Okay. Awkward? Okay, yes, little awkward. One of the very things that we learn from attachment theory, from humanistic theory, is that when people are disconnected, the biggest problem for them is they feel alone. And the biggest fear for us as human beings is being alone. So in the moment when we get disconnected, and sometimes people don't realize that they actually do feel alone, but deep down inside when they start to avoid, the avoidance is like relieving in the moment, but then it becomes very isolating and it's difficult for them to sustain that. So they become reactive. Being alone is number one. And that's why we want to reassure that you're not alone. I'm right here with you, right? It's like, I wasn't there for you then, but I'm here for you now.
So we had a great question. Before I answer it, I want to remind everyone, this is a present-based process. Whatever happened in the situation, yes, it happened in the past, right? Sometimes you'll hear like, oh, way to bring the past up. Well, you actually experience those same feelings. They come up again, even if the situation happened in the past. So this is important when you're doing the conversation. We really have to stay in the present. So we want to avoid saying like, oh, but it happened in the past. And I don't know, because you're going to feel that same way. And then also we don't want to say, oh, what are we doing in the future to change? Because we don't want to do that either. We want to stay in the present moment when we're sharing the experience. Okay, so every part of this requires us to stay in the present. Okay, so the question was, let's say we want to implement this tomorrow, okay, what do we do? And if we have a conflict and we don't want to be able to just we can't just hand a form to someone and say like, okay, time to do the form. They have no idea what's going on. Yeah, we have a training, of course. We can train internal trainers. We can train you individually. We have an online certification process. We have an online, in-person, whatever. We could do it all. But starting today, we gave you a little pamphlet. And the very first thing you need to learn is validating phrases. Okay? Because when someone feels validated, they feel safer. By the way, we have all these resources. If you scan the QR code, you can have the forms available to you, the raw spots, the motions, and then it give you more information on our programs, all the books that we have. So we have an entire journal of all these forms I actually have a journal in every single office room, everywhere, in the meeting room, in the boardroom, in the kitchen, in the bathroom. Great place for people to read. Okay. Talk about their emotions to themselves. So this journal has just copies of the form. So let's say I have a conflict, I pull out the form. All right, let's get to it. So these are resources. So the first step would be to learn validating phrases. Very, very important. Because if you have a conflict with someone, how can they tend to your needs if they don't know how to do it? We have to first be able to tend to their needs. So we just say, it makes sense. I get it. Must be very difficult for you. And the other thing that I started
I'm going to interrupt you just there, just to validate you guys. You've just come in here out of the blue and You've been so courageous to take part in this process with us and to pair up with a complete stranger and go through this. And it does feel awkward and it does feel weird and it does feel strange. So I just want to validate you guys, first of all, and say thank you for having the courage and the strength to take the risk to do this with a complete stranger for an hour out of a conference.
Yeah, so just to finish because she asked the question, I just want to finish it. So number one is learning the validating phrases. And then number two is you can do your side of the form yourself, right? Or sometimes you can, like I have my team members, maybe they talk to their manager that's not involved in the conflict. Like I'm having a situation, I would like to, I learned this at the ATD conference and I'd like to do, or your friend, and you can go through it, or your partner, and you can go through it because that helps you de-escalate. Then when you come to them and you share, I felt it's a very different way. It's a very different approach, even if it's difficult for them to respond.
Yeah, so we have to finish because there's other people waiting here, but we are here to answer your question. Come to our booth 2205 and we can talk to you with your situation and answer all your questions. Okay,
Thank you guys so much. Good job.
Thank you.
Very
Great.
proud of you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.